The Alloon corvette Veilbreath shuddered as the last of its escorts vanished from the tactical plot. Counselor Threvik gripped the harness webbing, 3 of his 4 hearts hammering against his ribcage. Outside the viewport, the Vorashi capital ships moved with the patience of carnivores. They did not chase. They herded. 2 more jump cycles to Sol space, the pilot croaked. Her crest was flattened against her skull, a sign Threvik had learned to read in his decades of service. The posture of a creature who no longer expected to live. If the humans grant us approach, they will grant it. Counselor, forgive me, they have no reason. He did not answer her, because she was correct. The Alloon Compact had given humanity no reasons. 60 years ago, when the Vorashi Imperium had first carved its way into the spiral arm, they had not begun with the Compact. They had begun with the strange new species clinging to the third world of an unimportant star. Humanity had requested aid through every channel the Compact maintained. The Council had debated for 9 standard rotations. They had voted to observe. They had observed humanity burn. When the smoke cleared and the Vorashi had moved on, satisfied with the colonies they had raised, the Compact had quietly closed its embassies on Earth. There had been no apology. There had been no contact. The Council had judged the humans broken, a useful corpse, a warning to other unaligned species. Threvik had been among those who voted to observe. He had not slept well in any of the years since. The corvette emerged into Sol space without permission and without challenge. That, more than anything, made Threvik's spines lift along his neck. There should have been a challenge. There should have been pickets, scanning patrols, automated buoys demanding identification. There was only the silence of an empty system. Then the silence answered him. 48 human warships uncloaked around the Veilbreath in a perfect spherical formation, weapons hot, targeting solutions painted across the corvette's hull in neat, polite layers. The lead vessel, a wedge-shaped destroyer with hull plating darker than any metal Threvik had catalogued, extended a single docking clamp toward them. No hails, no demands, only an instruction packet transmitted in flawless Alloon trade cant. Counselor Threvik of the Compact, you are expected. Surrender helm control. Welcome. He stared at the message until his secondary eyes ached. Expected. The Compact had sent no advance notice. Threvik's dispatch had been a desperate, last rotation decision, made after the fall of Hellion anchorage and the loss of the 6th Fleet. There had been no time for diplomacy. He had launched himself toward Earth on instinct, the way one throws a hand against a closing blast door. But the humans were expecting him. Counselor, his pilot whispered, their formation, look at the formation. Threvik leaned forward. The 48 warships were not arrayed in any pattern the Compact's tacticians had ever modeled. The geometry was unfamiliar and beautiful, in the way certain executions could be beautiful. Each ship held a position that overlapped the firing arcs of 3 others. There were no blind spots. There was no room for a single vessel to escape. It was not a welcoming committee. It was a kill cage. And it had been arranged before the Veilbreath had even arrived. The docking clamp connected with a delicate, mechanical kiss. Atmospheric seals engaged. Threvik unstrapped himself with trembling claws and walked toward the airlock, rehearsing the speech he had prepared during the long retreat from Hellion, the speech in which he begged, on behalf of 100 species, for the help his council had once denied. The airlock cycled. A human officer waited on the other side. She was small by his standards, dark uniformed, her hair pulled back in a tight braid streaked with gray. Her eyes met his without flinching. Counselor, she said, the Admiral will see you now. Threvik opened his mouth to deliver his prepared plea. The human did not let him. Save the begging, she said quietly. We already know why you're here. We've been waiting 60 years. The corridors of the human flagship, Threvik's translator finally provided the name, ENS Wakeful, were narrower than Alloon design preferred, and lit in a low amber that turned every surface the color of old blood. The officer walked 3 paces ahead of him. She did not speak. She did not check whether he was following. He followed. Through a viewing gallery, Threvik saw the rest of the fleet for the first time, and his second stomach tightened until he could no longer feel his lower limbs. 48 ships had escorted him in. That was a fraction. The full formation stretched across the inner system in a column 30,000 kilometers deep, warships of a class he could not name, carriers the size of small moons, supply trains, repair tenders, dedicated electronic warfare platforms, mine-laying frigates. The compact's total combined navy across 200 member species would not have filled a tenth of what hung in the dark beyond the gallery's transparency. How Threvik's voice failed him. How long to build this? 60 years, the officer answered without turning, give or take. You have not been at war for 60 years. She finally looked back over her shoulder. There was no malice in her expression. There was no warmth either. There was something Threvik did not have a word for in any of the 4 languages he spoke. Counselor, we have been at war for 60 years. The Vorashi simply forgot we were still fighting. The bridge of the Wakeful was a quiet place. Fewer than 30 officers moved through it, each at a station so deeply integrated into the deck that they appeared to be wearing the ship rather than crewing it. Holographic plots floated in midair, displaying battle dispositions across 6 contested star systems. Threvik recognized none of them as systems the compact had ever been told about. At the center stood a woman with gray-shot hair and the bearing of a structure that had been struck many times and refused on principle to fall. She did not wear ceremonial armor. Her uniform was plain. She turned as Threvik approached, and her face, lined, weathered, lived in, held no anger. That was the part that frightened him. Admiral Iris Vance, the escort said, Counselor Threvik of the Elune Compact. Counselor, the Admiral nodded once. You have come to ask for our intervention against the Vorashi Imperium. You will offer trade concessions, mineral rights, and a formal apology from the Compact Council for the events of the Helio session. Have I summarized accurately? Threvik's primary mouth opened. How? We have been listening to your council's emergency sessions for 12 standard years, Counselor. We listened to everyone. Please continue. Was my summary accurate? He closed his mouth. He opened it again. Yes, he said, that was accurate. Good. Admiral Vance turned toward the holographic plot. The largest engagement zone, Hellion anchorage and the surrounding systems, rotated above the deck. Vorashi battle markers crawled across it like insects across a wound. Then I accept on behalf of the Earth Defense Coalition. Our fleet will deploy in 3 rotations. The Vorashi presence in the Hellion theater will be removed. Threvik's spines flattened so hard against his neck that one of them tore. Removed. Removed. Admiral, forgive me. There are 8,000 Vorashi capital ships in that theater. We are aware of the number. Their flagship class alone. We are aware of the class. Admiral, the Compact has lost 6 fleets. 6. The 6th fleet attempted to break the encirclement at Hellion anchorage and was annihilated under a standard cycle. Admiral Vance turned her head. Her eyes, gray, the color of cooling iron, settled on him. Yes, she said, we watched. The bridge went still. Not quiet, it had been quiet the whole time, but still, the kind of stillness that precedes a verdict. You watched. We watched all of it, Counselor, every minute. We did not intervene because you did not ask. And our terms, he whispered, what does humanity want from us? She did not smile, she did not need to. After, she said, we discuss terms after the Vorashi are gone. Threvik was assigned quarters on the Wakeful and told the fleet would jump within 3 rotations. He did not sleep. He could not. He paced the small chamber and replayed the Admiral's words until they had carved grooves into his thinking. The Vorashi simply forgot we were still fighting. He requested historical records from the human archive. To his surprise, they were granted without delay. A junior officer delivered a slim data slate and informed him politely that the materials were public on Earth and had been for decades. Threvik began to read. The Vorashi Imperium had emerged from the outer drift 61 standard years ago. Their first major engagement had not been against the Alun Compact, nor the Veshani Federation, nor any of the recognized powers. Their first major engagement had been against an unaligned species classified by the Compact as Grade 4 primitive, a designation reserved for those still confined to a single star system. That species had been humanity. The Vorashi had arrived at Sol expecting to harvest. They had instead encountered something that bit back. The records described in flat human prose the first hours of the assault, the loss of the Lunar Watch, the firebombing of the Pacific Arc, the kinetic strikes that had erased 12 cities in the span of one rotation. New Iberia, capital of the Mars Session, had been struck without warning. Population at the time of impact, 2,400,000. Survivors, none. Threvik's lower mouth went dry. He scrolled further. Casualty figures, industrial losses, a list of colony worlds rendered uninhabitable. Then the section he had not expected, the formal request for aid, transmitted to the Compact Council on Day 3 of the assault. The Council's response, transmitted on Day 12, was a single paragraph regretting that the Compact could not intervene in the affairs of unaligned powers. The humans had received it during the bombardment of Tranquility Base. The record continued. The Vorashi had eventually moved on, satisfied with their work. They had logged humanity as a depleted resource and turned their fleets toward more profitable targets, the Veshani, the Halloran Cluster, eventually the outer Compact provinces. Year by year, system by system, they had advanced. The Compact had watched its borders contract. The Compact had sent diplomats, negotiators, surrender envoys. The Vorashi had eaten them all. And humanity, in the dark, had begun to build. Threvik reached the section on Admiral Vance and stopped breathing for the span of a full minute. Iris Vance, born Earth, North American Federation, joined the Lunar Watch at age 19, survived the destruction of New Iberia by being off-world at the time of impact. Her daughter, Iris Vance, age 6 standard, had not. The official record contained only the date and the casualty number. The unofficial record, appended by some long-dead archivist with a sense of weight, included a single line. Iris Vance is the reason the Halo Lance program was funded. Threvik did not know what a Halo Lance was. He read the next section, then the next. Then he set the data slate down with hands that would not steady, because what he had read was no longer a historical document. It was an obituary written 60 years in advance, for a species he had spent his career fearing. The Vorashi Imperium had committed every error a hunter could commit. They had drawn blood without finishing the kill. They had turned their back on the wound. They had given the wound time. Threvik thought of his council. He thought of the votes he had cast, the speeches he had given, the careful arguments by which the Compact had justified the abandonment of a species that had asked, simply and clearly, for help. He thought of Admiral Vance's face, the lack of anger, the lack of warmth, the lack of need. Humanity had not agreed to fight because the Compact had finally come to them. Humanity had agreed to fight because the moment had arrived. The moment they had been waiting for, building toward, sharpening every blade and tuning every weapon for, since the day a 6-year-old girl had died in a city called New Iberia. The fleet would jump in 2 rotations. The Vorashi did not know what was coming. Threvik did, and he wept in the dark, quietly, helplessly, in a way he had not allowed himself in 60 years. The human fleet did not announce itself. When the jump signature blossomed across the Hellion Theater, the Vorashi Tactical Command initially classified it as a sensor ghost, a refraction artifact from the dying Alun anchorage. By the time the Imperium's analysts had revised the assessment to unknown contact, The human fleet had already finished its translation and begun deploying into firing formation. Aboard the Vorashi flagship Renma, War Master Kael'vor studied the new contacts with mild interest. His command crew chattered, then quieted. The contacts numbered in the thousands. They were not Alun. They were not Veshani. They were not Halloran. They wore no recognized markings. Identify, Kael'vor rasped. Designation unknown, War Master. Hull configurations do not match any known galactic power. Energy signatures suggest, the analyst hesitated. Fission-fusion hybrid drives, primitive. Kael'vor's serrated mandibles parted in something approaching amusement. Then they have come to die. Engage at standoff range. Conserve munitions. The Vorashi battle line, 8,000 capital ships, the largest concentration of force the Imperium had ever assembled, pivoted as one toward the new threat. Targeting solutions painted the strange wedge-hulled vessels. Forward batteries powered up. The Renma itself, 3 kilometers of layered ablative armor and gravitational beam projectors, oriented for a broadside. The human fleet did not move. It held its formation, vessel by vessel, in a lattice that draped across half the system like a net cast by something patient. Kael'vor noted, with the small, distant curiosity of a creature that had never lost, that the lattice was not arranged for defense. It was not arranged for maneuver. It was arranged for one thing only: maximum overlapping fields of fire projected outward into the volume of space that contained the Vorashi armada. He had time to understand what he was seeing. He did not have time to act on it. The halo lances fired. There was no visible beam. There was no flash. Each lance was a coilgun 2 kilometers long, embedded in the spine of a human cruiser, designed to accelerate a tungsten-cord slug to a fraction of the speed of light. Each human cruiser carried one. There were 6,000 human cruisers in the formation. They fired in a single coordinated wavefront, timed to within nanoseconds, targeting solutions pre-computed during the 3 rotations of waiting. The Vorashi armada ceased to exist over the next 52 seconds. The Renma was struck by 19 slugs in the first salvo. Its 3-kilometer hull, designed to withstand sustained beam fire from any known galactic power, vaporized from the bow inward. Kael'vor lived long enough to register the impact on his console. He did not live long enough to issue an order. Around the Renma, the rest of the Imperium fleet shattered in waves. Capital ships peeled open like fruit. Carriers detonated in chains, their fighter wings still in launch cradles. Beam frigates that had not finished spinning up their primary weapons broke apart at structural seams. The second salvo arrived before the first wave of debris had finished expanding. The third arrived before the second salvo's plasma had cooled. Aboard the Wakeful, no one cheered. Admiral Vance stood at the central plot, watching the Vorashi battle markers wink out. Her hands were folded behind her back. Her face held the same unreadable composure it had held in the corridor when she met Threvik. Her gray eyes tracked each erasure without satisfaction and without grief. A junior officer at the targeting station whispered the count. 3,000 confirmed. A pause. 5,000. A longer pause. 7,400. Then, after the final salvo had completed its arc, and the last Vorashi signature had vanished from the plot. Engagement complete. Hostile fleet neutralized. No surviving capital ships. No surviving auxiliaries. No surviving fighters. The bridge was quiet. Not silent. There were still the small mechanical sounds of a working warship, the hum of life support, the soft chime of damage control reports confirming, in every case, no damage sustained. Admiral Vance did not turn from the plot. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, quietly enough that only the officers nearest her caught it. For Aris. The bridge did not respond. It did not need to. Outside the Wakeful, the war zone was empty. The Vorashi Imperium, 8,000 ships strong, was gone, wiped from existence in 52 seconds. Humanity had arrived, and humanity had finished what had been started 60 years earlier. The Alun survivors did not cheer either. The remnants of the Compact's Sixth Fleet, 23 crippled vessels huddled around the broken hulk of Hellion anchorage, drifted in a silence that should have been celebration. Their pursuers were gone. The siege was broken. The war was, for all practical purposes, over. And yet the surviving Alun captains sat at their consoles and did not move. Because they had seen it. They had seen the human formation hold its position while 8,000 Vorashi capital ships pivoted to engage. They had seen the lattice fire in a single coordinated wavefront. They had seen, in their sensor logs, replayed and replayed and replayed in the hours that followed, the precision of it, the economy of it, each slug placed exactly where it needed to be placed. No wasted munitions, no corrective fire, no second volleys against targets already destroyed. The Alun were sailors. They understood in the deep and instinctive way that all sailors understand what they had witnessed. They had not witnessed a battle, they had witnessed a demonstration. Aboard the Wakeful, Threvik stood at the viewing gallery and stared at the empty volume of space where the Vorashi had been. His translator informed him, in a flat synthetic tone, that the human admiral was about to address the Compact Council via long-range transmission. Threvik did not move to attend. He did not need to. The transmission would be heard everywhere in the galaxy that had ears. Admiral Vance's voice, when it came, was unhurried. Council of the Alun Compact. This is Admiral Iris Vance, Earth Defense Coalition. The Vorashi presence in the Hellion Theater has been neutralized as requested. Survivors of your Sixth Fleet are advised that medical and repair assistance is available at their discretion. A pause, long enough that some on the Compact Council, Threvik would later learn, had begun to believe the transmission had ended. I will now state our terms. The pause that followed was longer still. You will not pay us in resources. You will not pay us in territory. You will not pay us in the trade concessions Councillor Threvik was authorized to offer. We do not need them. You will pay us in honesty. Every member species of the Compact will formally acknowledge, in open session, that humanity requested aid 60 years ago and was refused. Every council member who voted to refuse that aid will be named. The vote tallies will be made public. The diplomatic records will be unsealed in their entirety. You will not apologize. We do not require apologies. You will tell the truth. In addition, humanity will be granted a permanent seat on the Compact Council with full veto authority effective immediately. Our representative will not be subject to recall. Our vote will not be subject to override. We will sit at your table and we will speak and you will listen, because the alternative has been demonstrated. She did not say the alternative is us. She did not have to. These terms are not negotiable. They will be accepted within one standard rotation, or the Earth Defense Coalition will withdraw to Sol space, and the Compact will manage the next Vorashi successor power without our assistance. Transmission ends. The carrier wave cut. In the viewing gallery, Threvik discovered that he had not breathed during the entire address. He drew a careful breath, and the air tasted of recycled ventilation and the small bitter chemistry of human ship atmospherics. He understood, then, what he had read in the archive. He understood why the records had been made public on Earth. He understood why no one on the Wakeful had cheered. The Vorashi had not been the lesson. The Vorashi had been the example. The lesson was for the Compact, for every species that had watched humanity burn and called the watching prudence. You did not need to apologize to humanity. Humanity did not want your apology. Humanity wanted you to say, out loud, in front of your peers and your children and the histories that would judge you, what you had done. Threvik leaned his forehead against the gallery transparency. The empty volume of space looked back at him. Somewhere out there, the atoms of 8,000 Vorashi ships were spreading outward in a slow, expanding cloud. He thought about his own vote 60 years ago. He thought about saying it aloud. The Compact Council convened in emergency session within 2 rotations. Threvik, attended by proxy holopresence from the Wakeful. He had requested permission to remain aboard the human flagship until the terms were ratified. The request had not been formally approved by his government. He had submitted it anyway. The session was the longest in the Council's recorded history. Species after species rose to speak. Some defended the original vote. Some condemned it. Some demanded that the human terms be rejected on principle, that the Compact's sovereignty could not be subordinated to a single power's veto, that the precedent was intolerable. They argued for 9 standard rotations. They argued until their throats failed and their secondary translators gave out. They argued in the end because none of them wanted to be the one to vote. The vote came on the 10th rotation. The terms were ratified. 81% in favor. The names of the original 60-year-ago council members were read into the public record in full sequence, including the names of those who had died in the intervening decades. The vote tallies were unsealed. The diplomatic correspondence was published in full, in every member language, in every public archive on every settled world. Threvik's own name was read aloud. He did not flinch. He had been preparing for the sound of it for a long time. When the session ended, he requested a private audience with Admiral Vance. He was granted one within the hour. He found her on the observation deck of the Wakeful, alone, looking at a starfield that contained no warships and no debris. She did not turn when he entered. He stood a respectful distance behind her and waited. "Counselor," she said eventually, "you wanted to ask me something." "Admiral, I want to understand." "Understand what?" "All of it." He gathered himself. "The fleet, the weapons, the preparation. You did not build this in response to our request for aid. You built this before we asked. You built this knowing the Vorashi would return. How did you know?" She was quiet a moment, then she spoke. "We captured a Vorashi command vessel 30 years ago, in a fringe system you never named on your charts. The vessel was returning from a survey of compact space. Its records were intact. Its officers were alive. We held them. We learned from them. Everything we built since that day was built for one purpose, to destroy that specific enemy with that specific doctrine in that specific volume of engagement." 30 years, Threvik whispered. "You have known for 30 years. We have known for 30 years. You could have warned us." She turned then. The gray of her eyes caught the deck lighting and held it. "Counselor, we did warn you. We submitted intelligence to your council on 12 separate occasions over the past 30 years. Every submission was rejected as unverified. Every submission was logged as the propaganda of an unstable species attempting to regain galactic relevance." He had no answer for that. "We stopped submitting after the 12th refusal," she said. "We decided to wait." "Wait for what?" "For your council to come to us, for the moment to be witnessed." The understanding moved through him like a cold tide. The Vorashi advance had not surprised humanity. The Compact's collapse had not surprised humanity. The desperate dispatch of Counselor Threvik to Earth had not surprised humanity. All of it had been allowed to unfold, not engineered, not provoked, but allowed, because the act of humanity's intervention, if it were ever to occur, had to occur in front of an audience that could not deny what it had seen. The Vorashi were dead because humanity had been ready. The Compact had been spared because humanity had decided to spare it. And the galaxy now understood, in a way no diplomatic communique could ever have communicated, exactly what humanity had become while no one was watching. "Admiral," Threvik said, "will you ever forgive us?" She considered the starfield. "Forgiveness is not the work I do, Counselor. I am a fleet officer. My work is the protection of my people. The compact is now a part of the structure that protects my people by treaty and by veto. That is sufficient. It is not forgiveness. It is more useful than forgiveness." She turned back to the stars. Threvik understood the audience was ending. He bowed in the deepest courtesy his species permitted and left her alone with the dark. The treaty was signed in the compact's high chamber on the homeworld of Alun Prime. Admiral Vance did not attend the ceremony. A junior diplomat from Earth's Foreign Service signed on humanity's behalf, accepted the credentials with quiet courtesy, and departed within the rotation. The galaxy reorganized itself around the new arrangement, with the speed of water rearranging itself around a stone. Member species reassessed their navies, their treaties, their long-term plans. Several smaller powers requested observer status with the Earth Defense Coalition. 2 requested formal protectorate status. The coalition declined the protectorate requests and granted the observer status with limitations. The Alun Compact endured. It had been bent badly by the Vorashi War and worse by the revelations that followed. But it endured. Threvik resigned his council seat within the standard year and retired to a small academic posting on a moon his species had once colonized in better times. He wrote a history of the Vorashi War that did not flatter the Compact and did not flatter himself. The book was widely read. The Vorashi Imperium did not return. Its outer territories collapsed without their central fleet to anchor them, fragmenting into warlord enclaves that the coalition monitored from a distance and dismantled, where necessary, with the same surgical economy that had been demonstrated at Hellion Anchorage. The galactic map redrew itself in slow, decisive strokes. Humanity did not become an empire. It was not interested in empire. It was interested in something the Compact had never had a word for: a careful, patient stewardship of its own borders, conducted on terms it dictated, with full knowledge of every nearby power's intent. The coalition's intelligence networks were never withdrawn. Its weapons programs were never decommissioned. Its shipyards continued to produce hulls at the same rate they had produced them during the long 60-year silence. Earth, the planners said, would not be surprised twice. On the bridge of the ENS Wakeful, 3 standard years after the engagement at Hellion Anchorage, a young officer approached Admiral Vance during the late watch. The officer was new. She had been 6 years old when New Iberia was struck, the same age as Aris Vance had been on the day she died. Her name was Lieutenant Inara Halsey, and she had been transferred to the Wakeful the previous rotation. She had been waiting for an opportunity to speak with the Admiral. The late watch, when the bridge held a skeleton crew and the lights ran low, was the only opportunity she had found. "Admiral, may I ask you a question?" Vance did not turn from the plot. "Lieutenant, was it worth it?" The plot rotated. The empty volume of the old Hellion Theater, now patrolled by coalition vessels, drifted across the display in a slow, indifferent arc. Vance was quiet for a long time. The lieutenant began to suspect she would not answer. She prepared to apologize and withdraw. Then the Admiral spoke. "My daughter was 6 years old, Lieutenant. She liked the color yellow. She liked a particular kind of fruit grown on Mars that we cannot grow anywhere else. She asked me, the last time I saw her, whether the Vorashi were going to come to our city, and I told her they would not. I told her the Compact would help us. I told her we were safe." The lieutenant did not speak. 3 days later her city was struck. I was on the lunar watch. I saw the impact from orbit. I watched the dust cloud reach the upper atmosphere. I knew, before any casualty report, that she had been in the school district nearest the impact zone, because I had walked her there myself the rotation before I shipped out. A pause. "You ask me whether it was worth it." The Admiral turned. Her gray eyes were not wet. They had not been wet in a long time, but they held the lieutenant in a steady, even regard the younger officer would remember for the rest of her career. It was not worth it, Lieutenant. It was never worth it. Nothing we built and nothing we did and nothing we destroyed will ever be worth what was taken from us. That is not the purpose of any of it. Then what is the purpose, Admiral? To make certain it does not happen again. She turned back to the plot. The lieutenant understood she had been dismissed and saluted and withdrew toward her station. Outside the Wakeful, the stars held their old, patient positions. Humanity watched them. Humanity, having learned what it had learned in the dark, would not look away again.